So this is just a very brief presentation about the ELENA facility. The ELENA facility was created back in 2009 as a joint initiative between the EIB and the European Commission. And so far we have supported 167 projects. Roughly half of these relate to completed projects, about half of them ongoing projects. This roughly represents close to 300 million euros of grants that have been disbursed and committed, and with an expected volume of investments close to 9.5 billion euros. We have projects in almost EU countries. For the time being, we missed the two smaller EU countries, Malta and Cyprus, and looking forward to engaging new projects in those countries and also in other countries, but particularly in these two. I think 15 years after the creation of the facility, we should already have tackled all the projects. I think this is the most relevant slide. This is the basic rule of the ELENA facility that is also somehow shared with the PDA that will be presented later on. This is about what we call the leverage factor. With ELENA, we provide you grants that you can use to finance technical assistance technical assistance activities. Apologies. But we want to see that those grants have been used to generate investments. So at the end of the project, we want to see a ratio between investments mobilized and grants of at least 20 for energy-related projects and 10 for projects in the transport and residential sector. These two sectors are typically more challenging, so a lower leverage factor. Projects on district heating, street lighting, public buildings, a leverage factor of 20. So, if for every single euro of technical assistance that you ask for, you need to demonstrate at the project end investments of at least 10 or 20 euros, depending on the sector. This is how we calculate the leverage factor. This is not calculated project by project. This is calculated at the portfolio level. So if one project doesn't proceed, if one specific public building is not renovated, but you have a portfolio of 10 or 15, no problem if you reach the leverage factor at the very end. These are typically the investments that can be supported by ELENA. In what we call the sustainable energy envelope, we talk about public buildings, building integrated renewables, district heating and cooling, street lighting, traffic lighting, and so on. Residential, exclusively focused on residential buildings, privately owned, publicly owned, single-family houses, multi-apartment buildings, everything. And then in urban transport, we typically look to investments that aim to decarbonize public urban transport. How do we build an ELENA project? An ELENA project can be created as the combination of investments in multiple sectors. Our biggest restriction relates typically with the transport related projects, because they typically have a dedicated budget, because this comes from different funding streams inside the European Commission, and so the rules typically imposes to have dedicated, having the segregation across projects. But of course, as we have now in the energy performance of buildings also some dispositions to promote the use and installation of charging stations in buildings. That is something, the installation of charging stations in public buildings or in any other type of buildings, it's something that can go either in the residential envelope or in the sustainable energy envelope. Who can apply for ELENA support? Typically, everyone. Public entities and private entities. On public entities, we talk about central governments, regional government, municipalities, other public agencies, typically everyone. From the private side, we start on top with energy agencies, but energy agencies are usually kind of a strange animal, if I can describe it like that, because they have public capital, private capital. There are several models, so one-stop shops organized by municipalities or by any other private stakeholders, associations, private associations of housing owners, homeowners, business and industry associations, they can also apply for ELENA support. Banks and other financial intermediaries, they can also apply for financial support. Let's say that still nowadays, a big part of our clients or the entities applying for ELENA, they are on the public sector, but we still have a quite significant number of projects in the private sector. What can be paid with the ELENA grant? Internal staff and external experts. What is the right balance between internal staff and external experts? It's up to you, and this should be defined by you to fit your project needs. Just that. What can be paid by the ELENA grant? Stakeholder engagement and coordination. If you want a project on residential sector, of course, mobilizing families and the homeowners to renovate their houses, it's a quite critical activity. Promotion and marketing, feasibility and technical studies, energy audits, structuring, bundling and business plans, tendering procedures and preparation of all the relevant documentation, legal and financial advisory and project management. So there is a quite wide range of activities that can be financed by ELENA. What cannot be financed by ELENA? Just 2 or 3 examples in a nutshell. Overheads are not eligible for ELENA support. Software, hardware, travel costs, and so on, all this is not eligible for ELENA. Also, if you want to create a network of one-stop shops and you need to pay the rent of each one of these offices, which are spread around one region or one country, this is also not eligible. Again, just what can be paid, which are the eligible costs of ELENA. Regarding internal costs, the cost of parts of the personnel clearly assigned to the project. This includes not only the salary, but also the social security charges and other statutory costs that are incurred by the organizations, mandatory insurances, and so on. Regarding external experts, it's typically the full cost of the service that is being provided, justify that that service is considered to be eligible. Regarding the application process, this is on a first come, first served basis. So there are no calls, there is no competition. This is a completely open process. The applicants will also receive support from the IB to enhance and to make their applications eligible. ELENA finances up to 90% of the eligible costs. So there is a percentage of 10% that needs to be financed either by the entity that is applying for to ELENA or by someone else. Let's imagine a project on housing renovation. The remaining 10% that are not financed by ELENA can be charged to the different homeowners. Is this the best approach? Is this not the best approach? It's something that we can discuss, of course. It has some advantages and also disadvantages. And the eligible activities are typically those that are necessary to develop and make the investments happen, but this is something that is discussed between the entity that is applying for ELENA and the IT team during the application process. Trying to be short and efficient, how does the process happen? So this is something that doesn't happen in 3 months. My apologies. There is a certain level of bureaucracy from our side. There is also some time that is needed to develop the different stages of the process and make some validations in between. But I would say that on average, around 9 to 10 months, it's realistic. If we run fast, if we are efficient, probably 6 months, it's about the minimum that we can get. How does this happen? First process, you contact the IB and you submit a pre-application. What is a pre-application? It's a 4 or 5 page document where you are invited to briefly describe your project and your technical assistance team. We have an internal check on this. We assess if the project is eligible in principle. At this stage, we cannot guarantee that the project will receive funding later on, but at least we have a certain level of confidence that the project somehow complies with the eligibility rules, and then by having this compliance check from my side, I have the authorization to allocate more of my time to work on this with you. And also from your side, you have at least the trust that your project has some chances of getting approved. Once we have this eligibility check made, we move into the application stage, and here you have to write down a 40-page document, an application with a significantly more detailed level, with a significantly more detailed information describing the entity, the PDS needs, and the investments that you are planning to mobilize, providing a timetable for the investments, providing some milestones for most of the PDS activities that you are aiming to deliver. Apologies when I speak about PDS, it's Project Development Assistance or Technical Assistance. Apologies because the acronyms, they run quite fast in my head and then I forget that you are not familiar with them, and my apologies for that. We have the application, you submit the application, we have a look to your application. And you tell if this cost is too high, we need to reduce it, or that activity is not very well described, we need to describe it in a more clear way. So you will always receive feedback from our side so that we get into an application that fulfills with the requirements that are needed, so that we can submit a request for approval to the European Commission. We submit this to the European Commission. The colleagues from DG ENER, DG ECFIN, or DG MOVE for the transport-related projects, they will have a look to the request for approval. They will have questions, if there are any questions being raised. Once we get the approval, we can start preparing the financing contract that is signed between the IB and the final beneficiary, and the project can start. Just one or two notes about this slide, and I should be about to end. Eligible costs are only the costs that are incurred from the beginning of the ELENA project. So all the costs that you may have during the application stage, they are not eligible for ELENA support. What else is relevant to highlight here? So during the different stages, as I have mentioned to you, you will always receive feedback from us. At least until now, it has always been possible to reach an agreement. If we tell you that we believe that this cost is too high, we will provide you a justification why we believe that that specific cost is quite high. And I kindly ask you also to understand this. We have a limited budget of roughly 40 million euros per year to allocate to projects across different member states. And we typically, when we get to an end of the project and there are some funds that have not been used, it's quite complicated or virtually impossible to allocate these funds to other projects. So that's why we always are a little bit picky regarding the project budgets, to make sure that you receive the money that you need, but that you don't end up with money on your pockets, my apologies, that you don't use and that somehow cannot be used by any others. So in the next slides, I have just a very brief example of what a pre-application is. I will just keep this in the slide so that you can benefit from this information. It will be fully available to you. So to show you, and the objective is just that, to show you how easy it is to fill in the pre-application if you already have some ideas about the sectors in which you need to invest in the upcoming future, and for which you also need some support to finance the technical assistance activities. It's written, you can smart copy paste this to help you to fill in your pre-application. So in a nutshell, we typically look to minimum investments of 30 million euros. If you have an investment program of 20 million euros, no problem. You can speak with Michelle, because the PDA typically targets slightly smaller investment programs. Leverage factor 10 or 20. Application process continuous. Grant 90%. Usually on average 2 million euros. The time frame for the implementation of the project is 3 years for projects in buildings and 4 years for projects in the transport sector. Thank you very much.